Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. She is Jane Mednair. And that music, what is it called? Discombobulating?
It's called Discombobulate.
Discombobulate by Hans Zimmer can only mean that we're recombobulating with Dan Shafer. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoy having my own theme music from Hans Zimmer too.
I mean, he's the best.
Jane.
He's the GOAT, right?
This is. I'm really excited.
I don't know what the copyright is. If you were to put that on your podcast, if you could get away with it, but I don't know. Test the waters. Try it out.
We'll shoot first and ask questions later, right?
Ask for forgiveness after.
That has been my go-to in most of my content creation life, mostly because I don't make money off of any of my content. So it's like, who's going to sue me? Just, downloading things and being like, well, let's just go with it. All right.
This is a private conversation we're having, right? This
totally,
isn't on this isn't getting any of us in trouble. Okay,
no.
Good.
Not admitting guilt whatsoever. Dan Shafer. So I think Town Call after us talked about this yesterday, and I didn't know what they were talking about until I got home and read about it on my own. But it seems like the Republicans, not just the Wisconsin Republicans, but the entire RNC has seen the light. Has seen the light that early voting, not such a bad thing. That maybe they should double down on it. And yesterday, the RNC launched effort to boost Republican early voting in Wisconsin. Thoughts, Dan Shafer?
I was thinking about this. This is like if I came on the show today and said, I'm a Celtics fan now. I'm not a Bucks fan. I'm a Celtics fan. I'm going to reverse course on everything that I have said and done and believed in for years and years and years. It is such a, I think it's just such a hypocritical reversal of the way they have approached voting rights for so long. And now that they realize that these are not illegitimate votes, these are not some sort of fraud, these are not, some nefarious way to swing an election. It's just voting. So I think they realize that they've put themselves at such a disadvantage with early voting, because people like early voting. People like having, not having to rearrange their schedules on election day if it's an inconvenience for them or whatever, and might be able to, get that vote to your local clerk early. And now they're just going to reverse course and pretend like none of this happened. And of course, I also think it's hilarious that they are launching this in Wisconsin, which has been one of the states most aggressively rolling back voting rights. And they're launching it with Ron Johnson, who has been maybe the senator, the single U.S. senator most responsible for the ridiculous attacks on the legitimacy of the 2020 election. Obviously, his role in the fake elector scheme and January 6th and all that. It's just like the hypocrisy is just immense on this one.
And the truth is, sorry, Jane.
How do they craft this message? I want to be on the meetings as they craft this message saying, I know we've been telling you for 10 years that this is dangerous and it's all a lie and everything, but oops, we were wrong. I mean, they're never going to say that.
Yeah,
and they'll never admit fault in any of this. They'll never go back and admit like, hey, you remember the last 3 years when we were suggesting that your votes don't count? Remember all that we did with the year-long Gableman investigation? Remember all of the things that we've did during the Walker years and during the Voss years to roll back early voting, use, their friends in the conservative legal community to sue at every little juncture that would have expanded voting rights and early voting. No, we're just gonna brush right past that. Yeah, no, that's not happening. We're not gonna move right past that. No.
Well, and it's interesting because now they kind of have to put their money where their mouth is, because simultaneously there's now a new lawsuits for the Dropbox ban and the absentee ballot rules. And they're going to be challenged in a lawsuit ahead of, what are we, 12 days away, 11 days away from the Supreme Court flipping.
We're 7 days away.
Are we only 7 days
it's
away?
A week
it's August
from
1st. Yeah, August 1st.
Kristen.
Pregnancy brain.
August 1st. It's
blaming.
happening.
We're blaming. Yeah. I don't know what day it is.
I
just show up on time.
It's the little one's fault.
I saw something, just a quick side note. I saw something as a woman having her like trying to win an argument with her husband when she was pregnant. She goes, "I have 2 brains right now, so I'm right." And I was like, "I don't know if it works like that. I definitely feel dumber since I've had 2 brains." But I like the argument. But it's interesting. So is it Elias or Elias?
I'm not sure.
You know, so the law
about.
group, on behalf of 2 liberal-leaning organizations and a Dane County man, are basically challenging what came down. The RNC is so in favor of getting their people out to vote early. Are they going to magically also reverse course on drop boxes, on some of these rules that, you know, the conservative law group, Rick Essenberg and Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, are they going to like about face on this? And even if we don't get an apology, like I will take the reversal of them not fighting these stupid laws that they put in, because there's zero difference between the Dropbox, like putting something in a Dropbox and putting something in the mail. And if we can reverse that, like fine. Like
it's actually more secure to put it in a Dropbox. But
yeah,
yes.
and so it's like, is that where this is going? As far as like, if you guys are really embracing early voting, are you also going to not put up a stink with these lawsuits that are going to come forth?
Or when, you know, when Milwaukee tries to have things like an early voting station at Fiserv Forum or American Family Field, are conservatives going to sue to try to block that type of thing again? You know, all these different, they have used the levers of power in the legal system in so many different ways. And I think we've talked so much about what this shift will mean on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, but I think voting rights is really going to be one of the topics that's going to emerge, especially in the early going here after Protasewicz is sworn in next week. You know, I think voting rights is going to be a big part of that. I think gerrymandering is going to be a big part of that, because there are such obvious cases to be made in so many of these instances too. Like last week, I had a chance to interview Jeff Mandel from Law Forward.
Oh, great. We're going to actually have Nicole Safer on 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, also from Law Forward.
Yeah, and he was talking about how, you know, we might not see a huge shift immediately in what would happen with the Wisconsin Supreme Court, because these cases have to kind of make their way through.
Yeah.
But with gerrymandering, with voting rights, those are 2 issues that are expected to come up before the court fairly soon.
Fairly soon. Which is interesting, because even despite the attack on voting rights, despite the conservative court that has voted or ruled against these things with drop boxes and early voting and all of this stuff, statewide elections, Democrats have still done a pretty good job in Wisconsin, despite all of that. And it has been noticed by Politico. I'm assuming you saw this, because this is also your job.
I did.
But
yes.
Last week, Politico had an article that featured specifically Dane County, but college towns kind of across the country, but how basically saying that what Dane County has done has made it almost impossible potentially for the Republicans to win statewide here. Is that a fair summary of the article?
It is. And I think it's, you know, it looked at Dane County and a number of these college towns that maybe were even kind of, you know, 50-50 in the past and are trending certain directions. You know, but I think Dane County in particular, between young people voting in greater and greater margins for Democrats, and I think people in suburban communities voting in greater margins for Democrats, I think it has just supercharged the margins in Dane County to such a degree where it is the biggest problem that Republicans are facing in the state. The Dane County turnout machine. It was something I wrote about in breaking down the midterms and breaking down the spring election. You know, it's just such a huge part of what's happening in statewide elections in Wisconsin. And I think Dane County in that article really emerging as the example of a college town shift, of of another, number of demographic factors that are kind of baked into that as well. So I think it's really interesting, and it's making, we've seen it in the last two election cycles. It's making such a big difference. And I think, part of that also is because these are the first kind of normal-ish post-pandemic elections too. And I think you saw a response to what Republicans did during the pandemic and have done, with the levers of power as well in the state of Wisconsin. And there's just a wholesale rejection of that on policy, in addition to just kind of the demographic and organizational factors that are in play there as well.
Our guest is Dan Shafer. He is the founder of the recombobulation area. But here's my hypothesis. If the Republicans embrace early voting and drop boxes, they are going to double down on their efforts to raise the voting age to 25.
Oh, and we're seeing that from some of the candidates running for in a presidential primary field. I think Vivek Ramaswamy has been pushing that in a big way to raise the voting age, and we're going to see that too. They're going to try to limit, voting locations. They're going to try to limit, it's the double-edged sword of what they're saying and doing here, right? I think back to a couple months ago, the Republicans had their conference, or their annual conference, and the head of the GOP was saying, hey, we need to embrace early voting. We need to embrace blah, blah, blah. And then I think at the same time that they passed a resolution at that conference or something like that to say, hey, can we get rid of, I'm exaggerating, but hey, can we get rid of polling places at college campuses or whatever it might be? It's just, I think this is one thing that the party leaders in the base in the party don't seem to be aligned on.
Well, it doesn't seem, that coming out of that convention, granted, we were not invited, so we were not there.
We were rejected.
Now famously not invited.
Yes. All of our, all of our conclusions of what happened there is secondhand from what other people reported. But in general, it doesn't feel like there is a lot of consensus on anything. I don't feel like there's consensus on a candidate for president. There's certainly, we have no candidate to run against Tammy Baldwin right now. And this real internal struggle that they have as far as are we MAGA? Or are we trying to appeal to the suburban voters that we're losing? Are we fiscal conservatives and are we talking about kitchen table, economic stuff? Or are we talking about transgender sports and bathrooms and teaching that slavery was good? And I think there's they don't know. I don't think, it doesn't seem like they know.
We have a text I wanted to share with you from the 541. The GOP will use these lawsuits as their basis for the change of course. The courts say we have to, so we are going to embrace the decisions made by the courts.
So how do they embrace and encourage early voting, but only to their people? How do you have that selective, you guys should vote early, but not them? And how do you make rules and laws that facilitate that? What does that mean? Do you have an idea of what that could even look like?
I think, if I could try to, examine the calculus of what they're thinking here, I think there used to be the theory that high turnout automatically meant Democratic victory.
Which has been proven not to necessarily be the case.
And has been trending in the other direction lately, because I think you have people in the suburbs that have been trending Democratic are more reliable voters, people who will vote in every election, not just a presidential or not just a gubernatorial, but will vote in up and down the ballot and primaries and blah, 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 and all of that. And I think the kind of more white working class voters that the Trump campaign really tapped into in 2016, who knows if they're still there in 2024, people are less reliable in going to vote in every election. They might vote in presidential elections with Trump on the ticket. But I think that has kind of changed the calculus and say, okay, higher turnout automatically means Democratic victory. Now things have changed there.
Changed a little bit.
That's a factor as well.
All right, when we come back, Dan Shafer will still be here, and we're going to recombobulate not necessarily about anything in Wisconsin, but about X, the letter X, and how it makes you feel. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. She is Jane Madnair, and it is Tuesday, so we are recombobulating with Mr. Dan Shafer, founder of the Recombobulation Area, and a prolific tweeter, I would say. I think one of my best jokes was when I hosted your 2-year anniversary of the Recombobulation Area and interviewed you, and then we also played the championship game when the Bucks won. summer to 2021. And
Yeah.
my closing question to you was, who watches your daughters while you're tweeting? and, but to be fair, you've how you've grown recombobulation area. I think you can probably attribute a lot to Twitter and the community that you've built there. And so what I think of how it's getting upended by Elon, that can't feel good. And this week is probably the most upending news of what it's not even called Twitter anymore.
It's called X.
Called
Called
X.
X. It's just it seems like every couple of weeks there's some news with Twitter that makes it seems like, oh, this might be done. We might be done here. But then
Yeah.
again, it's like, but then things will calm down and people will get used to whatever stupid thing that Elon has passed down. And I think the tweet I always reference when thinking about this, Brooke Frizzell, who is another prolific tweeter in Milwaukee, said like something along the lines of, no, she said, leaving Twitter just because it's fallen into disrepair under terrible leadership. I live in a state run by the Wisconsin state legislature. So it's like, well, I'm not leaving because much like living in a state run by the Wisconsin state legislature, it's our problem and we're going to all fix it together.
And it's interesting that you say that, because it's like you've put like it's the sweat equity into a community that you've built there and stuff. I have found myself disengaging on there almost entirely just because like I don't have the energy to fight with people right now. And I feel like it's because it's like they just have too many other things going on. And so it's become toxic enough where I'm like, oh, if I put this out there, am I going to get something from one of these conservative trolls? And like, and then I'm going to have to go through the mental gymnastics. Like, do I want to respond to this? Do I disengage? And then I'll think about it and I'll probably come up with something like really witty, but then I'll talk myself out of it because it's like, oh, I don't want to be mean. And like, I don't have time to like do that argument in my own head, let alone then actually just like engage and go down that rabbit hole. And so I found myself totally not wanting to be there, which is frustrating because it is a community, but it's like, it sounds like he's trying to make this into the app to end all apps. Have you read about what he wants X to be?
Yeah, I think it's just, he'll say these things, right? He'll just say things in these interviews and try to explain what's happening. And I think ultimately, if you step back and take a big picture look at what he's doing, there was a really good piece on this by a guy named Casey Newton, who writes a Substack called Platformer. It's a really good one on tech community. And it's just, he talked about that it's not just, one little thing of changing it to X and, having these goofy, dumb 42069 jokes that he does all the time. It's just, he's trying to neuter a platform that has been an effective organizing tool and messaging tool for the left. And I think, it's a platform that has, of course, been used by all corners of the political spectrum, but I think it's a platform that's been used most effectively by those on the left. And I think that is ultimately what he's trying to do. He's trying to ruin something that has been, a tool to speaking truth to power and organizing on the left. And, I think there was an instance where he was just like posting a video joking about the Black Lives Matter t-shirts he found in the background or in some locker at Twitter headquarters and stuff like that. I think that is ultimately the goal of this is to break something. And whatever he says he's going to build, he'll say something and then go back on it a week later and then say it's part of a larger plan to do this and that. It's not. It's just breaking something. He's just breaking something.
Because and what he's saying is basically X is like a universe that pulls together 24 years of his ideas and wildest fantasies. This is from Axios. In Musk's random tellings, it will be Twitter plus Substack plus YouTube plus PayPal plus Amazon plus TikTok plus WeChat plus Baidu. I don't know what that one is. All rolled into one universe marked by the letter X. And
I'm sorry, when I hear that, I hear it in Kendall Roy from Succession's voice, where it's just like, we're going to be this, and this, and it's going to change the game. And yet, it sounds so pathetic. Like, these tech leaders have just been so pathetic on so many of these things.
But it's interesting because ultimately he's still $44 billion in the hole on this, right? And so one of the my brother sent me this one from Data Drive MD. I don't know who this person is, but this is an interesting theory. I'm just going to float it out there. The Twitter rebrand reeks of legal maneuvering meant to keep the company's most valuable asset, its brand, out of the fray. Rebranding affords Elon the ability to transfer Twitter brand assets to a shell company before X files for bankruptcy. This maneuver safeguards the brand from creditors and protects his ability to sell the brand without requiring the court's permission or reuse the brand if when X emerges from bankruptcy. This was him quote tweeting, by my calculations, we're 4 to 6 weeks away from X filing for bankruptcy and about 6 to 9 months from X emerging from bankruptcy and rebranding itself as Twitter. So,
Good a theory
is this
as
a
I've
way
heard.
for him to not be $44 billion in the hole?
Yeah, well, it's just a way that, another example in this country of even when billionaires fail, they still happen to make money and they still don't pay taxes and they still somehow fail upwards over and over and over again.
And that'll be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, in the 2 minutes that we have left, you got anything coming up? Any plugs or something? Any events, podcasts? Just generally subscribe to the
starting to slow down a little bit, but
okay.
as we begin to start to turn our attention towards 2024, towards the political news cycle that will soon envelop Wisconsin, I would recommend that you get that subscription to the Recombobulation Area now so that you can be on board for all that we have planned for covering elections in this crazy state for the next 18 months. And now we are just less than a month away from the first debate in Milwaukee. I've been writing a little bit about DeSantis and Trump, talked a little bit about that on WTMJ nights last week. So
nice.
That's all out there. Come check it out. Subscribe to the Recombobulation Area.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Dan Shafer, we will see you back next week when the Supreme Court will be flipping because apparently it's in 7 days. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a break for the top of the hour news. And when we come back, Renee Eastman from Leading Age Wisconsin is going to be here to talk about our crisis in our senior living centers across Wisconsin. Stick around. This is As Goes Wisconsin.